In this video, I'll be talking about using modules in a train simulator like TRS2019 or Dovetail's TS2019. I'll be discussing their origins and why I would use modules in my train simulator, as well as the benefits of using modules, and how to actually use these modules in Train Simulator TRS2019. So let's get into it. Let's have a look at what railway modules are, why they were originally invented, what the original benefits were, and why I sometimes use them in TRS 2019, particularly for longer routes. The concept of modules originated over 30 years ago to solve some real problems in physical HO model railway circles. Right from the start of the hobby, the standard integration was a 4-foot by 8-foot plywood panel as the baseboard. And for many years that was the biggest size that most people could afford or had space for. And when people moved, it was fairly easy for 2 people to carry the whole model railroad around. So as layouts got bigger and more sophisticated, so did the problems. So techniques were developed to build routes in modules, for when it was needed in the event of moving house, for instance. There were other benefits. You no longer needed to climb under a table in difficult positions for wiring. Just tip the module on its side or place it on higher trestles for wiring. And areas that were maybe not normally accessible, modules could be pulled out and easily made accessible in a nearby area. Modules have also been used by groups informally joining together and assembling a set of modules for operations nights, giving a much larger route than any individual could handle, which may have only happened once a week or once a month. Of course, there had to be strict standards for linking the modules, and that also came with time. And other times they were taken home by the individual owners for maintenance or private use. I would agree that most of these benefits and advantages are not really relevant to the software-based train simulator world, and I'll cover these issues shortly. But first, with computer train simulators, I'm not talking about using modules to save space, or to make the route more portable, or to carry them off to some meeting area to have an operations night. So, to demonstrate what a module means in TRS 2019 terms, let's look at an actual example first. In TRS 2019, a route could be defined as a length of railway 1 mile long or 100 miles long, and may typically be made of 3 or more major segments as the route gets more substantial. So 1, starting with a large city and large yard and a large industrial area. 2, the length of the main line running from the city to a point further along the railway, often including stations, passing sidings, industries requiring pick-up and delivery, and branches or spurs, some quite complex on their own. And 3, some where the railway ends, such as a medium-sized town or a portal, maybe an interchange siding or even a staging yard, or even just the end of the board, which I've often seen even in payware routes. If you think about it for a moment, building, testing and debugging such a monolith could take a very long time. And as it gets bigger and more complex during the development, things like computer graphics performance can become an issue, particularly in surveyor mode. Testing each of those 3 components can become quite involved, and it also means while there is more to build and develop, there's also less time to be playing real trains, at least not on this developing route. So how can modules help to address these issues? Well, building a module which is just a segment of the final 100-mile plan route means performance probably won't be an issue. And once you've filled your first module with track and other items, the tendency to just keep building more and more can be controlled. Plus it means you can fully develop one area, fully test it thoroughly, and make sure any errors or faults in the construction won't be carried forward, because hopefully testing will find most of those issues. But one difficulty remains, that is, it's hardly worthwhile or practical to be building sessions for a single module, which is where JMRI Operations Pro software comes into play. But I won't be covering it in this video. Suffice to say, unlike a session, it's quick to build, because there's no need to have any special components added on the track to get things working, unless you have AI trains in the testing process. And as you add modules, you can just add the new locations and any additional trains and rolling stock required, and so on, without having to scrap any of the work you've done in developing JMRI on the first module. This is not to say you won't be developing sessions if that's your preference, but logic tells me full sessions are probably not appropriate until the full route is well established. Another benefit of modules, if you're trying something a little different, like some special industry along the main line, and find after you've built most of the main line from city to city that you just don't have enough space left to do that particular industry justice, you can easily add extra boards to that specific module until you have it just right, without it affecting all the areas around it. And yet another benefit, if you have one particular area where you want to use DEM data for the landscape, once again, you can get it right on the module without affecting the rest of the route. And remember, once the second module is finished, it can be added to the first route module. But as long as you keep the individual modules as backup until the full route is well and truly finished, as well as that, I recommend each merged version of the full route also be kept under a separate name for backup as well. You can always recover from almost any major fault. This is just a couple of thoughts on where I would use modules, and there are many more. If you can think of any, please take time and use the comments below this video to let anybody else know about your idea. One final thought, after those suggestions I just covered, if you're building a great big 100-mile plus route, which you've broken up into modules, and something drastic happens while you're still doing some development on one area, you don't lose all that work of the full route you've invested in. Think about that one. Automatically isolating crashes and corruptions to only a small part of the route. Okay, enough of the theory. Let's do a simplistic example of how this would work. Then I'll show you some of the 14 modules which I've developed for my Pennsylvania and Ohio route as a real example of how this works. This module, Ashburton Mill, is probably one of the most intensive activity modules in the P&O route. Let's have a look at some of the more interesting areas of this module. Starting on the left-hand side of the plan, this is the engine service area for the Pennsylvania and Ohio Railroad. Next is where the Ashburton paper mill is located, and today is probably the largest and most complex industrial area on the Pennsylvania and Ohio Railroad. Just below that, we have the reasonably large interchange yard for cars being delivered and picked up, with a switcher locomotive assembling the cars into this yard, as well as moving the cars to the appropriate industry in Ashburton. Slightly to the right of that is the Ashburton passenger station and the township behind it. There is still quite a bit of work to do on this town, however. The next most significant area is the large harbour on the right-hand side of this module, which has only recently been added, and has a fairly large and busy industrial area. Here is wharf dock number 1, which is for general freight, and the other dock being for some specialised freight for Ashburton Mill. It's early days yet for this part of Ashburton, there's lots to do. Now that you've seen all the detailed images, here's a quick flyover pass of the whole Ashburton Mill module. I hope you found this tutorial enjoyable and of benefit. If you have any thoughts to share, please add a comment below the video. I always check the comments and appreciate every one of them. But now, that's it from me. Hooroo!